Now, Robert, there are lots of interesting things happen in terms of regulation. And one of the new things is something called DORA. Could you explain to us and indeed to the audience at large, what is DORA and why is it important?
Certainly. Thank you, Herbie. So DORA stands for the Digital Operational Resilience Act. That comes out of Europe. And while it is live today, the requirements become mandatory for financial firms on the 17th of January, 2025. Now, the focus is really around safeguarding resilience in finance versus cyber challenge because of the reliance on technology. And actually, as the audience has been listening to all of us speakers, you may get the insight that, wow, what we're able to do now in the financial markets is to trade more volume in more products faster, if we wish, but also with cloud computing, able to extend the hours of trading, the borders of trading, to ultimately maybe doing 24-hour trading the way FX is doing. DORA is an EU focus on specifically internet and communications technology, ICT, with 5 pillars to focus on risk management, incident reporting, testing, third-party risk, and information sharing. Now, in the UK, the FCA and the Prudential Regulatory Authority and the Bank of England rules have similar operational resilience, not specifically applying to ICT service providers, but it does focus on operational resilience more generally, where DORA is maybe more narrowly focused on digital operational resilience. Unlike DORA, the UK proposes firms assess impact tolerance for disruption to each important business service. Unlike DORA, UK proposes requirements for firms to map and test important business services to identify vulnerabilities. Unlike DORA, UK requires certain pre-approved control functions like chief operations functions, the senior management function 24 under the new regime to be responsible for managing these things. But ultimately, the UK regime is also coming in 2025, just like DORA, and firms complying with the EU's DORA can learn from the UK's regime and vice versa. Now, the one thing that is definitely consistent is the focus on the risk of third parties. And I want to really reference, in the public domain, there's an excellent speech by the CEO of the FCA, Nikhil Rathi, given in July of this year, talking about the FCA's approach to regulating big tech and AI. And one of the key insights was the emphasis on third parties. And I just wanted to share a few insights from his speech. He said, as of 2020, nearly 2/3 of UK firms use the same few cloud service providers. And obviously, the regulator wants to regulate critical third parties. And relating to these critical third parties, that will include AI services, but ultimately it's to help ensure resilience, which ultimately comes down to confidence in the markets. Thank you.
Okay, Stefan, Hamish, your thoughts on DORA? Is it something which you're thinking of already? Is it something, Hamish?
I mean, already, I think, as Robert said, I think the UK government's considering similar legislation, but already regulators are asking all our customers or all regulated entities a lot of questions, a lot of probing questions about their resilience, about how their systems operate, about what they would do in case of any failures. And quite rightly, some of those questions are filtering down to ourselves as a technology vendor. And we're having to, of course, work with our clients to help answer some of those questions, consistently work with them to improve processes. I mean, resilience is multifaceted at the end of the day. Clearly, when we're building software, that's almost paramount in all our minds. We have to look at that from the very beginning to be able to build systems that actually are resilient, especially given the industry, the nature of where they're deployed. So clearly, software resilience, network resilience are all incredibly important. I think there's one aspect that's often overlooked, and that's almost the human element, is human resilience as well. So that includes things like, well, do operational staff know what to do, for example, when there is failure? Do they know what the fallback procedures are? Are they able to actually handle those scenarios? And that's where, again, we as technology vendors do have that responsibility to engage at an early stage with our respective support teams, operational teams, have dress rehearsals, review procedures, review those processes to make sure that when failure does happen, we can mitigate the effects and get the market started again as soon as possible.
Before I turn to Stefan, those are all very interesting points. In fact, but this is nothing new, really, DORA. It's just bringing it all together in one place. But, these are things that the market has always done, always wanted, in terms of resilience, in terms of standards which make sure that the resilience is there.
and have always already provided. So I would argue this, as you say, is nothing new. And in fact, the product which we are owning and running and selling to the community is and was originally meant to be called resilient multicast messaging. So it was something which was built into the and is built into the core concept to have something reliable as possible. And given that most of our customers are systematic relevant, so to have their operations run 24/7, that is something which is as critical as we see it, and this is in fact something which our customers are demanding for a long, long time. So I would argue that's nothing new. Yes, it's right. DORA brings some umbrella and some guidance to this, but in fact, systems in this area have been built with resiliency in mind, which is sometimes a trade-off to get the latency down, because it can either be resilient or reliable in the sense that you have multiple instances doing the same, but there's a trade-off in terms of latency with that. Also, with going into cloud, you definitely will face latency issues in favor of some resiliency and reliability.
There's always those trade-offs. It's interesting about any kind of software. There's always trade-offs between all these different factors. I mean, you can't have it all. And again, it's part of our role to explain to our customers what's feasible. Just wanted to pick up briefly on the cloud role and the role of cloud in going forward in the financial industry. I mean, I think for a while it took a little bit of time for people to start thinking, should we actually be using this? And the regulators had more focus on it as well. But clearly, there's a lot more adoption now. Certainly, in terms of using it, which I think is a great idea, using it for test environments.
Development
A really good way of going into it rather than immediately thinking, right, let's move all our production systems to the cloud. But I think one thing to note about cloud in general, it's a whole new skill set to actually manage these things, to actually keep them up and running. So while you might not necessarily be investing in physical infrastructure, there is a whole new skill set there that you need to do. And I think there's also the question of price structure as well. You're no longer investing you're not doing CapEx and investing in servers and routers and so on. You're now paying for compute time and compute and space, which is very different.
Going back to one of the points you mentioned about the human element in terms of resilience as well, and that often that's the weakest point actually. And that I know quite a few serious problems will happen when the human being waits too long before they ask for help. In other words, the standards say, when this happens, here's what you do. But someone wants to be brave and try and fix it themselves instead of shouting for help. And that's when you get absolute disasters. We've seen it happen quite a few places, even at exchanges.